The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV. Hot topics, food, fun, entertainment, and serious business. Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese.
We're so glad you joined us for this edition of Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. Joining me again, one of my very favorite guests, just an amazing human being. I mean, let's just go there. He's got all sorts of accomplishments on top of that, but he's just a great guy. I've got Reuben D'Silva, who is just an amazing force in politics. He's also a world history teacher at Rancho High School, a military veteran. He's done so much in this community, and what is so great about him is he is so passionate. You know, in this electoral cycle, there are a lot of people who run for office because, let's face it, they want to be famous and it's a job. But then there are the people like you who have a passion, who really, really believe in America and want to make a big change. Now, you bit off a big chunk. You've now run in 2016 and 2018 for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, both times going up against an incumbent. But one of the things I loved when you were on the show right before this election cycle was you said, yes, you knew you were going up against the big force in terms of Dina Titus, an incumbent, but you still feel very strongly that this is what change is all about. Tell me about that.
Oh, yes. I think that you did mention that you know, I have a certain passion, especially for doing things in a certain way. And I think that we need more people involved in politics in general. I think one of the great real issues in Nevada politics is the fact that we don't have as much participation. And what I mean specifically by participation is people actually running for office. It's the same old people. It's like I call it musical chairs. They'll go from the county commission to the state senate to the assembly to Congress and governorship, you know, attorney general, whatever. So you have the same people. This is something that we see in Nevada politics going back, you know, several decades. And you know, I had a fundraising trip to Chicago during this last election cycle. And when I was out there, I was just captivated by just how many people are just involved. You know, you have a county, a city council seat or an alderman seat, they call it out there, and you have dozens of people wanting to sign up and then run for those offices. And that's a democracy to me. And what really astounded me more so than anything else, this was again my first trip to Chicago, extended trip, and actually in a political environment, was the amount of minorities that were involved. And it struck me, there's something about participation equating to empowerment. I mean, you got to remember, Chicago was the town that brought us Harold Washington, and also brought us Barack Obama. You know, so again, there's this inherent link, I believe, with greater political electoral participation and empowerment. You know, again, I'm not one of those folks who's going to shy away. I ran against Dina Titus twice. I wish you'd debated me. This would have been, you know, Dina, if you're watching this,
we did give you a shout out, you know, on the show.
It's been a great forum for a debate. But I think, again, these sort of things, you know, running for office, having debates, having a robust engagement, civic engagement is what really makes democracy stronger. And we need more of that now, more so than ever, I believe.
And one of the things I really credit you for is taking that risk, getting your name out, getting people to know you, because it's easy to sit on your couch and criticize the system and say, oh, you know, but to get involved and for you to know that you were going up, you know, up a pretty big hill, but saying, you know what, I'm going to put my name out there, I'm going to put what I believe in out there, and over time, this is going to turn around. And what I was thinking about after I called you to be on the show was, there's a story about, and if I'm wrong, please, you guys go ahead and email me, but I remember reading something about Abraham Lincoln, that when he ran for Congress, he was just smashed, lost big time, and then decided to run for president and won.
That's true.
So it's like, just because you've lost an election, you've made an impact on so many people who didn't know who Reuben D'Silva was before, and now they do.
That's very true. You know your history. That's awesome that you know, a fellow Rancho alumni, I should say, you know, knows history so well. But yeah, he, you know, before actually becoming the president, the only political office that Abraham Lincoln had was Congress. He ran for Senate. He lost, you know, famously to Stephen Douglas, and then came back and won the presidency at probably the most pivotal time in our nation's history. This is a man who, again, ushered us through the Civil War and reunited the country, or helped reunite the country afterwards. And again, you know, if you look at the last, aside from Donald Trump, the last 4 presidents, I want to say, who was that? Barack Obama, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George H.W. Bush. Right. They all ran for Congress, and they all lost their first time around.
Right.
So again, you learn from your misgivings. You learn from the places where you didn't succeed. George Washington, is one of the greatest examples. I think. This is a man who, during the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, lost an entire unit to the British, had to surrender at Fort Necessity, but he never gave up.
Right.
And he then led his country to independence and freedom, and now we are living in the greatest country in the world. This is somebody again who didn't give up when he could have, who kept on going. And I think that's an important political lesson out there. You got to keep moving, got to keep going, and don't ever give up, because there's a lot of people out there that want you to give up.
Right.
But you got to keep fighting, and in the end, we will prevail.
Catch us up for people who are new to Reuben D'Silva. Just something of your background, how you got started, and what your school was like, and serving in the military.
Well, I did grow up here in Las Vegas. My parents were immigrants. They brought me here from India when I was 2 years old. And at first I didn't talk too much about this, because my mom was the one saying, hey, don't mention that, especially now that you're getting into the public eye, running for office and things like that. But we were here undocumented without papers for a long time. And it was something that became an issue for our family. My mom couldn't get a job because she had who didn't have a work permit. My dad had to work 3, 4, 5 jobs at a time, small things here and there to sustain our family. But we moved to Las Vegas when I was 6 from New York City. And then I went to CP Squires. I grew up in North Las Vegas, went to a J.E. Manch. I attended St. Christopher's Church, and then went to Rancho High School. And while I was there at Rancho High School, really became more involved. I want to say I joined the student council. I was the senior class president, the homecoming king, which is fun. I got the free tickets. I got the wave and from the convertible for the homecoming game. Captained the soccer team. Played basketball. Was on the varsity quiz team. I ran track, had a school record there for a long time, until some of my own students, broke it my first year teaching, which is bittersweet.
Wow,
it's like you don't have the record no more, but it's your students who did it, so it is pretty awesome. So after high school, I went on to CCSN, it was called back then, CSN, and while I was there, I encountered a recruiter, and this is again, 2003. This is when the war in Iraq was underway, had just started. And there was really this sense in my neighborhood, especially, of which is an immigrant neighborhood all the way, Civic Center, Lake Mead. I mean, we're pretty much all immigrants, or the sons and daughters of immigrants.
But you're right down the street from Nellis Air Force Base.
Right down the street from Nellis Air Force Base, true. And there was this real sense that, hey, look, this is an opportunity now to give back to the country. And there was also some folks saying, hey, look, join the military. You get your benefits. The GI Bill can help pay for your education. You can eventually get a house, things like that, which I made use of. As one of the greatest benefits that come out of serving is some of those education and housing benefits and healthcare benefits, which is important to reiterate. So I decided to join the Marine Corps of all branches. My dad was mad.
Did your mother just kind of go, okay, really, you could have gone into the Air Force. Why would you go where you have to run toward the bullets?
It was just, I think, the 18-year-old in me. I wanted to be that cool
macho,
guy, and learn how to use the different weapons and stuff that they were talking about. I had a pretty good ASVAB score. I could have gone into multiple different branches, different MOSs, but there was something about the Marines, and I joined the infantry. The Marines themselves changed the MOS on the way to boot camp. They said,
once again, your poor mom.
Oh yeah, my mom was worried, but my dad was really upset. He's like, "What are you doing? You could go into military intelligence or some of these other branches that were open up to you." So, but I decided to join the Marines. My MOS was changed while I was in boot camp from infantry. It wasn't my choice. They changed it to motor T, which is truck driving, which I found out when I was in the combat zone, which is equally as dangerous, because we were the main targets. I mean, we were getting blown up, shot at.
You had the supplies, you had the weapons, you had everything.
It was. We were the targeted, MOS, if you want to say that. So while I was, in boot camp, I finished it up. I finished up my training, came back. And finished up at CSN, and went to UNLV and started my bachelor's degree there in American history. And in my first semester there, I did pledge Phi Beta Sigma. I got to throw a little shout out to my fraternity brothers of Sigma. And then that first semester at UNLV, I was deployed to Iraq and went off to the war. This is during the surge period. This is early 2007. And again, this is the heaviest fighting the United States military had been involved with since the Vietnam War. We're talking about towns like Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad. I mean, being complete war zones.
Right.
And I saw all that. You know, it was really something that just blew my mind. I'd only seen these sort of things in movies.
Right.
You know, but then to ride through a town like Fallujah, buildings blown away and big holes in buildings from obvious, bombings or airstrikes, and it really was just a awakening call to that this is what happens in the world. This is war.
This is real
war
war
in its
yeah.
rawest form. And even having conversations with some of the people there, the kids, I used to take American cigarettes with me just to give them away to the townspeople that I would come across as a way of showing, hey, look, I care about you as well.
Right.
So one of those missions, actually a resupply mission to Fallujah, I was actually injured. I was shot through the arm by a sniper. I lost use of my not total use, but significant use of my left arm. I had a bullet that went right through my arm. Just ripped a huge hole in me, almost blew my arm. I'm like the littlest guy in the platoon too. I mean, It's crazy. The littlest guys, we don't want to always get hit by the big guns.
Right.
It's crazy, it seems like. So I was medevac to spend some time in Germany, and then a year at Balboa Navy Hospital in San Diego, which is not a bad place to recuperate, by the way. That sunshine and them beaches is pretty nice, yeah. So and after finishing up my my recuperation there, and again, while I was at Balboa, I must say I met some of the most courageous and heroic people. These are fellow Marines and soldiers and sailors for the most part who are recovering with me, and I never at all felt disabled, or sorry for myself. I had a gunshot wound to the arm, but they were kids. They're younger than me. I was 21. Some of these kids were 18, 19. I say kids because they were young. They're not even considered legal adults.
Right.
They couldn't even come out and play cards or throw some craps here in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But again, with their extremities blown away, limbs missing. They sustained IED wounds, multiple shrapnel wounds throughout the body. Some of them were blind. A friend of mine was shot through the face. He's a very lucky individual. Got his jaw blown away in a sniping a couple days after myself. But again, it was just so positive and just so like, I'm just gonna get better. I want to get my life together. Some of them were getting married, meeting girls in San Diego and getting married. I was just like, these, it showed me just the true resilience of my generation.
Yes. That
even though all this is going on in the world that was looking at us saying there's there's obvious problems with them, PTSD, these are serious issues.
Right.
But I saw so much positivity in these young folks who were recovering with me. Right. There was this sense that, hey, look, I just want to get better. I want to get back into the real world. Some of them wanted to get better and get back into the Marines or the Navy, and I was like, that really, I still tear up when I think about that. Yeah. And it really showed me the best of my generation. It's something I will never forget.
Yeah.
That sense of resiliency and that sense of wanting to get better so they could just live their normal lives. So after finishing up at Balboa Hospital, I came back, finished up my degree at UNLV. And while I was at UNLV, that recession hit real hard, and
and there were no
jobs, and I was studying to be a teacher.
Sure.
Teaching usually there's a pipeline from UNLV to the Clark County School District, and for the first time in years, decades even, they stopped that pipeline. There was a hiring freeze, and I couldn't be a teacher.
Wow.
So here I am with the quintessential millennial, dilemma. Hey, you go out there, you work hard, you get an education, you serve this country in the military, but then when you come to that point where you need to get into the workforce, there aren't any jobs.
Right.
Because something's going on.
Right.
This was obviously the effects of the Great Recession, and so I was like, what can I do? So I decided to take a shot and applied to some good graduate programs. I said, what, if I'm gonna go at it, I'm gonna give a shot at the Ivy League.
Exactly.
And I got into Penn in Columbia. It was totally amazing to me, because I know that my grades weren't like all the way there, but they were decent. But I guess they liked the package that I brought.
Right.
And I went on to the University of Pennsylvania. And that's why actually Rico King here was here in the studio with us.
His campaign manager Brown is just amazing. He already talked about jobs.
Yes.
He's now working in the Clark County in the education system as well.
Realm as well. Yes, he's the UNICEF director for the Clark County Education Association, the teachers union.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah, that's so great. Yeah.
So he's also caught the political bug. He's a young guy working, in the environment.
And his brother Rico's here in the studio, who's probably Facebook living or doing something as well, and he's going to be working with Reuben moving forward to get involved in the communities, start doing some entrepreneur activities. So
a couple businesses or something.
One of the things that I also really love about you is that your commitment to the community is so just intense and direct because. And I was always telling people I'm a Las Vegas girl, and it wasn't until fairly recently I realized, actually, I'm a North Las Vegas girl. And I think it was Mayor John Lee who kept saying, Rikki, you got to stop saying that. You grew up in Nellis, and so and you went to Rancho, so you're really a North Las Vegas girl.
As a John Lee, he's a North Las Vegas guy, Mayor of North Las Vegas, but he's always been in Northtown.
So I said, well, yeah, that is really true. That community is so, and what you're talking about here, and he was talking about that too, and he was on my show, is that the ethnic diversity in North Las Vegas is unparalleled to any other part of the valley.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, we have all the major groups represented there. I'm Indian American myself. I grew up in a neighborhood back then which was about 60-40 Hispanic and African American.
Right.
It's more Hispanic now, but we had everybody there.
Right.
I remember there was a Thai restaurant, and the family lived in the neighborhood. It was all sorts of diversity, and Rancho was such a diverse,
always.
Campus, such a diverse. I think when I was there, it was probably the most, I would venture to say, the most diverse campus in Nevada even.
Right, yeah.
Everybody was represented there, all socioeconomic classes.
Right.
You had the kids from the neighborhood, but then you had the students bust in from Nellis Air Force Base.
Right.
And also the
That was my
kids.
crew, right?
Yeah. So it was very, it was a cosmopolitan place to be.
Right.
And you were able to talk and interact with different sorts of people. So North Las Vegas is an extremely diverse place, and I think there's a lot of hope for the future of North Las Vegas.
Right.
Because of that strength that comes from diversity.
Now, what made you decide to, or two things, what made you decide to choose history as your focus, and then what made you decide to go into politics?
That's a good question, because I started off, as just a general major, when I first got to CSN, and then I was a philosophy major of all things. And I remember I had a
and what were your parents saying about that? By this time, they're like, "We got the weirdest kid here. What's going on here?" Right.
I mean, I enjoy ideas. I enjoy religion, worldviews, things like that. After Penn, I went on to Yale to get a degree there in comparative religion and politics. So I've always have been involved and interested in these sort of questions. But I saw that philosophy may be something too specific. So I decided, and history. I've always loved history,
Sure.
and so I decided to change my major to history. And because I really believe that history is really the source of understanding everything. History is the story of not just one people or a country, or it's the story of everybody.
Right.
And historians will tell you that there's no one way of looking at history, even the history of a country or yourself or a family or a community. There's multiple perspectives.
Well, exactly. It's like it's a perspective you bring to that that environment or to any individual event as well.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's going to see it differently as to what it means and how important it is, and whether this is something we should even get involved with.
That's very totally correct. And it makes you an open-minded person,
right?
Because there's no one single truth,
right?
There's multiple truths.
Right.
Sometimes there's hundreds of ways of looking at a specific person or a event, and I enjoyed that. Being able to have those sort of conversations. In science, you have truths. 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4.
Right.
In math.
Right.
But in history, you say something like, was Christopher Columbus a hero or a villain?
Right.
That becomes a point of contention.
Yeah.
Or how do we assess Barack Obama's legacy?
Right.
Was he a good president? Was he a great president? Was he a bad president? There's multiple ways, and people will have they'll to their dying day say that my perspective is the true perspective.
Right.
So these are important training grounds, really. So when I was in those history classes, that's the one thing I took away. It's that you can have multiple perspectives on the truth, and you can also be in a situation where you can walk into a room with one single purview on something,
right?
And when you walk out the room, have a totally different mindset.
Right. I always tell people that my opinion is based on the information I have at this moment. If you tell me something new, I'm going to go, let me take a look at this.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things I find so limiting in politics, we're going to talk a little bit about that, what you're seeing in the political scene right now, is that somehow we have shifted to these very definite, what you're talking about in science, where people see everything as black and white. Well, I was raised because of being in the military and being exposed to all sorts of different cultures, even before going to Rancho, was that everybody, depending on what part of the world they come from or how they were raised, or is that everybody's got their own particular personal truth. That doesn't mean it is the truth.
Yeah, very true.
It's just that person's experience of being in the world. And I always kind of feel sad for politicians who are blasted when they change their mind about something. To me, that's a mature thing. You should be able to say, I've got something new, and I was either wrong or I didn't have enough information when I took that stand. Let me now rephrase this and say this is something that I want to see that type of person. You know, not the person who says, you know, when my father was a Republican or my mother was a Democrat, and so that's the only way I'm going to vote for the rest of my life. Well, really? I mean,
that's very true. You know, I think democracies are more healthy when you have, of course, as I mentioned already, more participation, but having different, even political parties. You know, I ran as an independent in 2016 because I wasn't happy with the Democratic or the Republican Party, and that's a growing movement in this country. You know, you see that there's such a disaffection with the American public that the largest group of, if you want to call it a political party, are the nonpartisans, folks who aren't affiliated with any party whatsoever.
But when you talked to me when you decided to run as a Democrat, you were voicing what my concern was too, because of course I've always been nonpartisan. But then that limits you to who you can vote for and how much influence you can have on an election.
And those are structural issues I think that you can change if you go to like open primaries or weighted primaries, things like that, weighted choice primaries. Those actually help, you know, because then it allows everybody to participate in a much more general way. So if you're a Democrat and you like a Republican, you can vote for that person. Or if you're a Republican and you like a couple of Democrats you can vote for those individuals. I think that adds, it makes your vote more valuable, and it also forces the sides to talk to one another. Because I got to compete for everybody's vote, not just the votes within your party. And again, there's been lots of people out there. President Barack Obama's talked about this. Even George Bush. You know, these are folks who said that these closed primaries and especially the drawing of districts that are overwhelmingly Democratic or Republican are causing this problem. Because you can be a Democrat, and like my district, District 1, overwhelmingly Democratic district. The Republican is not going to win unless a miracle happens or something crazy takes place. So you know, and I remember having conversations with people, you know, about this. Like, I'm not, you know, when I ran as an independent, I was talking to Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, everybody. When I was running in this Democratic primary, I'm only talking to Democrats, of course, because it is a closed primary. But knowing that more often than not, when I go into the general, I'm probably not going to have to engage with the Republicans at all. And that, in and of itself, I know that's the way politics works, but it's not. There's something like very inherently
limiting, and well, and when you were on the show before, I tell people this all the time, one of my very favorite governors, because it was just such like a sucker punch in a way, was Kenny Gwynn, who ran for 2 years, basically, you know, billboards everywhere, and a lot of people like, who is Kenny Gwynn? I mean, he was the school superintendent. That was really his big claim to fame. So he really wasn't known across Nevada, so a lot of work went into his campaign. He ran as a Republican. As soon as he actually got elected to governor, he said, well, I'm really not a Republican. I'm a Nevadan. Oh my goodness. People were just like, what? And that's how he ran the state when he was governor. He said, I'm a Nevadan, and that's what I'm concerned of. He might have used the Republican Party as a way to get elected, but once he actually got in office, he said that was always his goal, was to get enough of a position to do good work in the state of Nevada for all Nevadans, regardless of party affiliation.
Kenny Gwynn was a great governor, and you know, he's one of the reasons why I got my education paid for through the Millennium Scholarship. It was a huge deal, you know, for me, you know, and for my family. And it's folks like that who are willing to work with all sides to create, to collaborate, that are going to, I think, move us forward. And this country that's at a moment right now where we're so divided. You know, I remember just the visceral reactions people had to Barack Obama from the right. They were just saying, oh, this man is a fascist, he's a communist, whatever. I mean, communism and fascism are two opposite ends of the spectrum, but they call him the guy the same thing. You know, the Tea Party movement, and there was a lot of just anger and animosity there. And then the same thing with Donald Trump, you know. You know, it's so we're coming to this point now where we're so divided. And that political affiliation even is something that you see on like those online dating things. And so, what party are you a member of, Democrat? Or, I mean, even in our personal relationships, it has such an effect that it's going to require some kind of a moment. I think either two things are going to happen. One, we're going to hit rock bottom, and we're going to have to, as grown-ups, say, hey, look, we got to work together. We have to. We can't hate one another simply because of political differences. In the end, like you said, you know, Governor Gwynn said, we're all Nevadans. On a much more macro spectrum, we're all Americans. You know, we have to work on certain things together, and we can't hate on one another. Or we're going to come to just total fractionalization, balkanizing the entire country, and we're going to be completely divided. And that's not a good thing.
well, my parents, and I'm sure you, just from what I know about you, your parents probably did the same thing. We were not raised in terms of religion or politics. It was sort of like, you know what, you do what works for you. It wasn't like we've always been raised this way and you've got to do it this way. We were encouraged to go out and to explore, to go to different churches, to hang out with people from different religions, to get involved in politics, to read the paper back when, the paper actually, did research. There were real journalists back then who actually asked questions and
that's true, very true.
Things.
Journalists like Rikki here.
They didn't just go off the top of their head and say, "This is what I believe." I actually got into one of the biggest, kind of verbal scuffles with another very, very prominent journalist here in town, and we were doing a show together, and I said, I love the Tea Party. Well, that he didn't take his shoe off and beat me to death during the show in that moment was just a miracle before God. And I explained to him, I said, you know what? That's what makes America healthy, is that you have these different factions. And until the Tea Party was formed, there was a huge portion of the American public that didn't have a national forum, that didn't have a voice. And so the Tea Party gave them that voice of like-minded people. I said, I think that's great. No, and this is a quote, he said, I think they're all idiots. When did it start happening that to disagree with somebody was to be able to call them names? And that's the only thing that I find, kind of a little bit discouraging now, is that we're in this cycle, and please weigh in on this, where people are calling names before they even find out what the end of the other person's sentence is. It's like they start talking, and you believe this, and I hate you because of that. Well, you know what, maybe let me explain how I feel, and then we can maybe agree to disagree. But in the meantime, we'll learn something more about a different group of people that we didn't know before. Yeah.
That's very true. I'm a high school teacher, and I tell my students all the time, don't name call. Let's have some adult conversations in here. Of course, we can have different perspectives, and we get in some hot debates in class. I teach history, and especially some of the more modern stuff. We start talking about Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, issues, the transgender bathrooms. We had serious conversations in our classrooms about these, in my classroom at least, because we wanted to touch upon current affairs. But it was in the name calling, and I would always address it, address the question, make a comment, but don't name call, please. And the crazy thing is, in our political environment, the greatest statesmen, the greatest stars in our politics, constantly name calling one another. Republicans, Democrats, everybody does it. Even I'll be real. I've caught myself, got caught up in all of that, at times. But it is it's an issue to me. I think the world needs Mr. Rogers now more than any time. They need Mr. Rogers. This is again, he had the demeanor. And he used to always talk about, hey, we're all neighbors here. We can have disagreements, we can have serious problems. I remember there was one episode I was watching about divorce, serious matter that he was talking about, but he was so gentle and kind about it, and just made, I think, the viewer and the audience feel good. I think we need more people like that.
I was watching there was a YouTube video that just caught my eye, where he had an African American who was either a postman or something else in his neighborhood, and he invited him over, and they took their shoes off and they put their feet in the pool together. Now this is back at a time when oh my gosh, African Americans couldn't get in the pool with white people. That was this is Mr. Rogers was doing that, and he did that in all sorts of these episodes, but it was done so subtly that it wasn't like hitting people over the head. And because it was a kid show, he was actually, as you said, broaching these issues, bringing up these issues in a way that no one could get offended by, but taking it for granted. Like, this is no big deal. Come on, you're my neighbor. Go ahead, you can be in my pool. Wow.
That's true. That's very true. I mean, I think that whole concept of neighborliness. And and I'll be real. I am a person of faith. I'm a Christian, and there's this strong, real core value in the faith, and then not just Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism. They all have this concept of your neighbor, and having compassion for your fellow human being. And that's something that we're missing in our politics. It's outright hatred. That we see on all sides. There's obvious things that happen that really make you mad and angry. But that anger should never, cause you to hate somebody. And that's something that I was brought up in, that sort of with those teachings. That great change can come about by loving other people. I'm Indian. We have Mahatma Gandhi, the man who went on to influence, people like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, who said that even in the most vile and most difficult And violent of times, love can conquer it all.
Right.
And in the long scope of things, the long arc of justice, as he'd say, it's love that's going to conquer.
One of the things I loved about Mother Teresa, she said over and over again, I will never go to an anti-war rally. If you have a peace rally, I'm going to go. In other words, she wanted to put her energy toward a positive movement, not against something. Yeah. Very
true, very true. You want, like, when I was running for office, it was always about the issue. Like I'm very pro-immigrant. I think and hearing some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the Donald Trump administration, even at the country at large, it's very anti-immigrant. Kick these people out. Children being separated from their families. It stirs you to anger.
Right.
But you have to just realize that if you also give into that hate and that anger, then that's what they want to get from you. They want to be like, there goes another brown guy, all pissed off and upset now. He's committing some sort of crime, damaging property, rioting. You're driven to that moment. And there've been times where I've wanted to do that.
Sure.
After the whole, all the shootings of these young black men, young black boys, I was driven. I wanted to do something, physical.
Right.
But you have to control that, because I personally think that that's exactly what the other side wants us to do. They want to say, look at them, they're acting like they're like how they're supposed to act.
Right.
And that has happened to me in my past. As a young guy, I was a pretty. I grew up in North Las Vegas. I've, acted on my emotions, got in fights, broken windows, mouthed it off, to authorities, and I always got that feeling like, we got you. This is exactly now we're putting you in handcuffs. Now we're locking you up in the dean's office. Right. And I never forgot those lessons, because that's how they want us to act.
Right.
So again, but you have to be able to emotionally control that and fight back intellectually, or fight back through other means. I think that's what people like Dr. King, Barack Obama, I think is the perfect example.
Sure.
They came with all kinds of mess against him, but he maintained his decorum.
He refused to even acknowledge it.
And he always handled himself with such class and charisma.
Right.
That he inspires me. That's the sort of person I look to. As an individual now, that I would want to emulate and be like. That even though the whole world was coming down upon him, he didn't tweet out crazy messages, or things that would rile up and divide people. He said he addressed the issue and then talked about, okay, now let's come back together again.
Now compare your experience when you ran as an independent to running as a Democrat.
Oh yeah. Two totally different worlds. As an independent, I felt that that I could talk to more people, and I could truly be myself. And running as a Democrat, you have party limitations. You can only talk to certain people. You're campaigning towards the Democratic voters. Right. But that in and of itself wasn't too much of an issue for me, because my platform was one that was very democratic. It was a progressive Democratic platform, the one that I ran on in 2016. It was a Bernie Sanders-ish, living wage, universal health care, immigration, pathways to citizenship, so on. It was that sort of a thing. Address economic inequality as a major issue in our country, a moral issue, racial justice. Right. So there wasn't too much of a problem, changing, parties, or coming back to the Democratic Party from being an independent. But it was a much more smaller audience, and it was a much more older and white audience.
Really?
That I was engaging with when I was running in the primary. That's something I'll just remember. It was something that struck me. And then we're looking at the numbers, and we're looking at the folks who come out in these primaries. Right. And these are the quote-unquote high-propensity voters. And the numbers were really mind-blowing. In the general, you're talking to everybody. Right. In the Democratic primary, the vast majority, I'll give you an example of this. We looked at folks who voted in the 12, 14, and the 16 primary elections. Right. There were only 389 in District 1 who were between the ages of 18 and 35.
Wow. That's
it. 385 who had consistently voted in all three of those. These are voters you can count on.
Right.
Between the ages of 45 and 65, now we didn't do the 35 to 45, 45 and 65, 10,000.
Wow.
All right. And then 65 and above, 14,000 people.
Do you think it's because that age range grew up with, they understand what the United States was, what America was before? So they're coming from a Depression era where they now really appreciate voting. One of the things that I find really frustrating, even in my own family, how many members of my highly educated, very successful family members don't vote. Yeah. And they've decided that, oh, my vote doesn't count. And I'm like, okay, let me tell you how easy it is to vote. We had the Registrar of Voters on a while back. I didn't realize that we were one of the first states behind, I think it was maybe either Texas or California, to do the early voting and to make it so accessible where you can go to Smith's, you can go grocery shopping and still vote. So it's not like you have to wait or have to even go to a trailer or something. You can just vote as a matter of course. And so I thought it was this easy everywhere. No, we're one of the few states that made it so accessible. So really there's no excuse not to vote, but and once again, one of the things I loved about not just the Tea Party, but even with Donald Trump or everything that's happening is, even if it takes getting people riled up and angry to make them want to get more involved in the political process, however it gets them there, I'm okay with that.
No, that is, there is a certain, positive aspect of getting folks just to the polls,
right?
But it's, I'll always have an issue with like what's driving you. Are you voting out of pure hatred and pure anger, or are you voting because you really want to participate and you've made a good judgment about the different candidates? But in the end, the more people who vote, the better democracy is. Right. Period. That's what it comes down to. The more people exercising their voices. I know this primary we actually had a bit of an uptick. I think about 20% of Clark County voters voted. We've had higher primaries in the past. We had numbers closer to 26%, 31%. But usually in my district, the number was closer to like 9%, 8%.
Wow.
So it's a very low voter turnout.
Was that
district.
discouraging?
Yeah, and we just had this Ward 5 race, so only about 9% of the voters came out. For an important city council seat. That's probably the most important seat to vote for, because these are folks who make decisions that affect your day-to-day life. So again, we can do better, And there is the thing that really took me back. Like you said, the big difference between the two elections was the people who I was talking to. I wasn't talking to folks who were like me, of color and younger. I was talking to people who were very different from myself. I was talking to older
was that difficult?
Caucasians. Not too difficult, but it was something that was eye-opening. Because oftentimes we had issues that were very different. Like to my generation, some pivotal issues are things like college debt, minimum wage, accessing opportunities for jobs, home ownership. For the older folks, I saw it was things like healthcare, Medicare, Social Security. These are the prime issues. So there was a difference there. And again, I think that the reason why a lot of the issues that young people are really that matter to us don't get addressed is because we just don't vote. I think we could definitely solve the college debt issue. We have enough money around there to first and foremost, not just forgive all the loans that were brought in, knowing that that's going to be an injection to the economy to get these people out of debt and completely freely involved in the economy, so they can take a little bit more risk, start businesses, buy homes, buy automobiles to drive them from work to their place of residence, those sort of things. We have enough money in this economy, through the Tobin tax is a good example, taxes on high-frequency stock trades, to pay for college from here on out. We have it. We've done this in the past. It's not something that's alien to us as a country. But we don't get these things addressed and taken seriously because we're not as involved in the process.
Well, I always say to people, America, the United States, we are an extremely rich country. We are allocating our resources poorly. I mean, we've got the money to take care of everybody, but where is the money going? And then how much attention is being put, how much pressure is being put on where the money is. So you folks have to give back to the community. You just can't keep taking and not be part of the process. I think that's where, and you touched on that, where the inequality in American politics, which is actually fueling the anger. But if it's going to fuel the anger, then you need to get to the ballot box and vote. Yeah,
that's very true. We talk about political division. There's a division economically in this country too, between the haves and the have-nots.
And it's getting wider by the day.
It's the most divided. Any economist will tell you, conservative or liberal, since the Gilded Age. That's when you had the robber barons or the captain of industries, whatever you want to call them, depending on what side of the argument you're on, who used to wrap $100 bills and smoke the cigars with, which is worth probably like $10,000 back then. $100 bill was, I don't know, but you see that divide. When you have a country now, the United States of America, where 90% of the land that's available is owned, by the top 8%, that's a problem. When you have all the new income that was generated since the Great Recession that's been going into the pockets of the top 2%, that's a problem. When you have a system now, homeownership is one that I look into. I just became a recent homeowner, where you have things like debt
North Las Vegas.
No, actually, just south of North Las Vegas.
Just south? Okay.
Huntridge,
the
Huntridge neighborhood. I'm a Huntridge.
That's true.
Huntridge
Well, you're still in that whole downtown area.
Oh, yeah.
You're still
I'm
like
right
Las
there.
Vegas.
I'm right there. My mom still lives in Northtown. She's over there by the Jerry's Nugget. She teaches at Marion Kalen Elementary School, which is in North Las Vegas. And so I'm a Northtown guy, you know, still Hunters and Northtown. I'm straddling that little border zone.
Right.
But you know, like you see these things like debt to income ratio, credit, you know, these sort of things that affect us. It's not affecting the top 1%, 2%,
Right.
and they're the ones who are now just gobbling everything up. You can't, you know, we used to be in a country now, I think from the end of World War II into the early 70s, where you had a thriving middle class.
Right.
America was in a boom back then. You
Right.
know, you had folks who were buying homes, who were even working class, middle class people who were investing long term in the stock market.
Right.
You know, who were, you know, who could afford 2 cars, you know, instead of just 1 or no car at all. You know, these are things that inherently make folks happy.
Right.
You know, and we know that as a student of history, I always tell my students, you know, when the bulk of the people in the middle are happy, you avoid revolutions,
Right.
you avoid rioting, you avoid turmoil. If you're happy with your existence,
Right.
you're less apt to go out there and take sticks and rocks and break windows and burn up cars.
Yeah.
You know,
and steal from people in your own
people
neighborhood.
in your own neighborhood, things like that. You know, you're safer. You want to be neighborly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you look at all the great revolutions throughout the history of the world. You know, whether you're talking about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution. You know, you look at mini revolutions within our country, within urbanized communities, ghettoized communities. They all stem from lack of access to economic ladders. That's the one thing we need to understand, and we're coming close to that point again in this country,
Right.
where we're so divided, where the vast resources of the greatest nation, the greatest economy in the world, are in the hands and the pockets, I should say, of a very few and select amount of people. You know, that is a recipe for revolution and for violence.
Right.
You know,
we're seeing that around the world.
Oh, yeah,
in
yeah.
other countries where
Venezuela,
they're
we've
really
seen
rioting over food.
Over
I
food,
mean,
yeah.
people don't have enough to eat, which is amazing to me because we've got an incredible agriculture system, which please don't get me started on how our resources are going toward meat, where we could actually, if we weren't even just raising cattle and chickens, we could actually have enough food to feed the entire world.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And then but then people want to profit off of this stuff,
Sure.
so they keep it away, you know, from folks who need food, who'd starving from hunger, but instead they would actually capitalize and you know, make profit off of food products. You know, I think, you know, my Mexican brethren, you know, they always, you know, I have you know, they understand this because they went through a revolution very recently. There's people who are still alive today who experienced the Mexican Revolution.
Right.
You know, Mexico by the year 1910 had come to a point where 100 families owned pretty much 99.9% of all the real estate, the land, everything in the country. These are the descendants of the Spanish criollos, you know, the white Spaniards, and they left the mestizos and the natives with nothing, pretty much. And Mexico experienced its most violent time period, you know, from 1910 to 1917. The people just rose up.
Right.
You know, you had folks who were, you know, historically, if you look at them, they were just bandits and you would be identified as criminals. Emiliano Zapata, Francisco Pancho Villa, who become national heroes because they said we're going to use our resources to fight against the government and to create a more robust, just, you know, system. And that's what happened. It took a violent revolution for that to happen, and we're coming, I think, close to that point where there is going to be more and more violence. You know?
So what's the next step for you? What is your progression here in politics?
Yeah, I'm not gonna step away from politics, and actually I've been taking a little bit of a vacation over the last couple of weeks. I went out to Mexico. You know,
watch it. Follow him on Instagram.
Oh yeah, at Reuben D'Silva, at ReubenDsilva. Follow me. You know, I've been, I've been doing some things. You know, and I'm also going to be getting involved in civic engagement and politics, of course. I took a vacation down to Mexico, which was much needed. I'm going out to Toronto, to Canada, to see a good friend of mine, and also visit a couple museums and things of that nature. I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd like that. When I travel, I like going to the museums, and then, you know, I'm looking at again starting the school year on August 8th, and really dedicating myself to the career of education and becoming more involved with the Teachers Union, which I'm a strong supporter of, the Clark County Education Association. Right. And you know, we have some big battles that are coming up here. You know, teachers pay raises, right. Working to minimize the amount of students we have in our classrooms. Class size is a huge problem.
His
here
classroom, and I've said
this. Rikki's
I
been there.
came to his classroom, and there were 50 bodies. The two of ours, you know, included, 50 bodies. And I said, you know what, parents, and I hadn't been to a school in a while. I said, parents have got to know what our teachers are dealing with. Just the amount, forget you're an amazing teacher, because I wanted to come back the next day because the lesson was so great. But just the physical, number, when we talk about classroom sizes, you've got to actually go to the classroom and experience it. Because we can talk about, 28 kids, you think 28 kids doesn't sound like a lot. When you talk about 50 bodies in a room, and it's just a testament to your teaching that everybody was just like this, like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. But the challenges that our teachers are facing are just amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a difficult environment to work in. We know education is one of the bedrocks. If we don't have a good education base, we're not going to have a good economy. We're not going to have well-trained folks who can participate and make the economy prosper. And we're really lacking big time in that here in Nevada. One of the reasons why I think is just the fact that you have good teachers who are, again, at the front lines of educating our populace here, who are working in such difficult environments, who are getting paid so little, who have great opportunities elsewhere. They're like, I was just talking to Rico about this. I graduated with 2 Ivy League degrees, came back, I had a Purple Heart, I was a war hero, but I was working for $32,000. For $32,000 a year. There's many people who are not going to do that. They're not going to graduate from Yale and then come to come to the hood and teach in an environment where the kids don't care about any of that. It's an overwhelming amount of students in your classroom. You got to work with other teachers who are stressed out, administration that's stressed out. To work in those environments, they're like, I can go elsewhere. I can make twice as much somewhere else. But it's that passion oftentimes that drove people like myself. There are many teachers like me who are in it because they know they're bettering the community. But we got to do better, because if we, I think, address those two things, teacher pay, and we address the working conditions for teachers, we can actually keep teachers in the career longer. And all studies indicate that the longer that a teacher stays in the classroom, the better and more effective educator they become. So this turnover rate, which is about, I think, 2 to 3 years nationally. It's a national issue, not just one that's affecting Nevada. They come to the classroom, they're full of energy, idealism, they want to make a difference, and then
they get burned out.
They get burnt out, and then they go elsewhere, and we lose good people.
Well, you're one of the good people, and this is my commitment to him, to continue to track your progress. You're a hometown guy, you really, really care, your passion is amazing, and I just see great things for you, because you're going to keep trying. He could be president someday.
We have to change the Constitution a bit. I'm an immigrant.
It could happen. It could happen. Thank you, Reuben, for being my guest. I'm glad you got a chance to come on. And again, we're going to be tracking Reuben. He is all over social media, so you can find him on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and just keep track of his progress and talk to him. Let him know how you feel about the way things are going in Nevada, and maybe hit him up to get involved in the political process.
Please do. Contact me. Feel free to contact me. My social media is all out there, very accessible. Just Google me. Phone number, addresses, all those things come up. And I'll say one thing here about Rikki. I grew up watching Rikki. She was such a role model to folks like myself, people of color. When she was the one face that we saw that looked like ours on TV growing up here. And she'd always come on after my favorite show on Channel 3, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And then we'd have Rikki right after that, So
me and Will Smith are like this.
This is a great honor, actually, to be sitting here next to Rikki.
I'm honored to just consider you a friend, and to just follow your career and see how your impact is going to spread, not just here in North Las Vegas, not just here in Las Vegas, but all across Nevada. So good job.
Thank you, Rikki.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Live Las Vegas with Rikki Cheese. Track him again, and we're going to track him as well. So try to stay cool out there if you can, because you know that we are roasting until September. So take it easy, and of course, make sure you follow us here at WWDB TV on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we'll see you next time right here.